Hi, I'm Luke. Today I'm going to show you the worker HIRricane. Worker has just recently announced and released this new blaster. This is the HIRricane, not to be confused with my HIRricane, the tubed blaster that's on the wall behind me. Why they are named so similar, I have no idea. I expect it's probably a little bit of lost in translation. Because the words hurricane, typhoon, a lot of those things translate very similar. This blaster is one of a kind, and it is unlike anything else I've ever seen for a couple of different reasons. It is a rotating cylinder fed, so essentially a magazine fed blaster, and it's got a 6-shot revolving cylinder, which automatically advances with a little spring inside. And it is a single trigger pull to both rev and fire. And the way this works is that a partial pull releases the micro switch, and right after, the feed arm pushes forward. What this effectively means is that with this little HIRricane blaster, you get semi-automatic, single-handed operation in easily the smallest flywheel blaster that I've seen. Aside from where I think its original inspiration came, and we were going to talk a little bit more about that as well today. This blaster is a very big departure for Worker. It came to me fully assembled, so I assume that the sellable ones that you will be able to buy will come boxed up and ready to fire. It's set up to work with IMR batteries, or in my case here, I've rewired it to a LiPo, and Worker does intend it to be used that way. They actually shipped a LiPo battery, a 550 milliamp 3S LiPo, and that battery will give you fairly decent performance. This blaster also feels and looks a lot different than a lot of their other products. I have a strong suspicion that this was designed by someone entirely different than whoever has been doing their Retaliator shells and the Swordfish. Either that or they're just trying out a new style and kind of a new look. It has sort of a almost Star Trek Next Generation or something. I'm probably, getting the reference wrong, but it's very blocky and sort of sci-fi. I could see it being pretty fun painted, but it is very, very tiny. The Desert Pigeon, made by Mr. Heathpants, one of the Reddit community members, is the next smallest blaster of its type, and it's a very similar concept where his blaster both fires and revs with one trigger pull. But you can see size-wise, they are very, very different. Now, this blaster, of course, has a mag feed for short darts, so it's a little bit different overall. Now, Worker will sell a number of upgrades, including additional magazines, which you can just pop in. And once you kind of get used to how that works, it's pretty quick. It's kind of a different system, but I've gotten, in just the last hour and a half as I've had this, I've gotten pretty quick at changing them out. Now, along with changing the batteries from IMRs, which I wouldn't recommend using IMRs because you're always going to get lower performance. However, it is safer and cheaper, and this blaster has a pretty low retail price of around $20. If it's coming from China, it probably will end up costing a little bit more here in the US after import duties and some profit margin and things like that. There are also other upgrades such as a barrel addition, which I have yet to test. I assume it's intended to improve the accuracy, though so far in my tests the accuracy has been quite good because it has a pretty long barrel. I would say it's approximately 30 millimeters, excuse me, maybe 40 millimeters in here, that allows the dart to exit quite quickly. They also offer upgraded flywheels, and I think these flywheels are pretty unique on their own, and I think our community is going to get a lot of use out of them because Worker's wheels are really well machined. I've sold hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Worker wheels and never had any problems with them. And they're also inside my Jupiter, so I know they can take really heavy abuse. Now, these are obviously made out of a smaller stock. They're not quite as small as the Flywheel the World project. They're sort of in between that size and normal elite sized. So I think these are going to be, and then I drop one on the floor, I think these are going to be really interesting on their own, but I will be putting them into this blaster to see how that helps with the performance. Overall, I think this is just going to be, it's a really unique blaster, and I think it's going to be really popular as far as use, because being able to, without thinking, a single trigger pull, fire off a shot, or a bunch, you know, as fast as you want to pull the trigger, it's just semi-auto, 6 shots. I think HVZ, this is going to make a great sidearm, and I think we'll see a lot of use in that way. One potential issue with this blaster is that it looks an awful lot like a blaster from Hanaya SH, and I don't know how to pronounce the name, but he's a YouTuber that posted a video about 4.5 years ago, mind you, of a very similar blaster. Now, there's nothing stopping Worker from producing this, and even if they clone the idea identically, it wouldn't matter because there's no patent and it's been out on the market for, well, years now. So there is some gray area as far as, you know, how people might feel about that. And I would love to hear your comments as far as looking at this design that I'm putting up on the screen and looking at this, and what connections do you make there. I personally think it's reasonable for Worker to sell this. That blaster had been released online, a video about it 4.5 years ago, and the YouTuber hasn't even made a video in the last 3 years, so I think it's fairly acceptable to be selling this. I'm really excited for these. I think HVZ players are going to love these as that quick last-ditch effort sort of sidearm. I think this will be pretty holsterable with the front shape. The only thing it's really missing is a lanyard. Now, there are some sort of goofy ergonomics. You can see that my adult hands do pop right off the bottom. I can pretty easily think of a little fix for that, so you'll see that coming at some point. It's also a very cramped, small blaster. It's almost like it was meant for smaller hands, which it very well could be. Now, that being said, I don't think I would trade it and make everything larger just to fit, because I love the fact that it's so small. Let's take it to the chronograph, and you're going to see here what we get as far as numbers. So now to the chronograph here, I've got standard AccuFakes set up, and we're going to see what we get for FPS readings. 83, 96, 109, 103, 106, 84. I did want to mention with this review that I have an obvious affiliation with Worker. I sell a lot of their products, so this is as unbiased as it can be, but I do come to the review with that viewpoint, so keep that in mind. All right, so we're in the backyard here. I'm going to do just a couple test shots so you can see this in action firing. This is the 6-round mag, and I've got 3 of them. So that was basically as fast as I could pull the trigger, and now I will try a little slower. Certainly when you pull the trigger that quickly, you're getting lower FPS. And I would say generally, they are shooting really quite straight, and I think it has to do with that barrel being fairly accessible, or fairly long rather. Has to do with that barrel being fairly long for the dart. Wow, elites are just awful. You forget. Pretty decent. So now I'm just going to fire these off as fast as I can. Oh, I ripped a head off one there. We'll blame the dart on that for now. That is remarkably fun, I have to say. That first one went over the fence. Sorry, neighbor. Surprising performance out of this tiny little blaster. And keep in mind, this is the stock wheels with a lipo that Worker sells. I do imagine that with the serrated wheels, we'll probably see a little bit higher wear on the darts with a little bit higher FPS, but that is going to be a good option moving forward. Just out of curiosity, since I do not know the specs of the motors in here, I did take a laser tachometer to the flywheels. I marked one of them inside with a black line, and then you simply shine the laser in here, line it up, and I was able to get around 23,000, 24,000 RPM. Now these wheels are smaller than normal ones, so I will have to do the math on that, but that seems very low to me, surprisingly. Because it's both lower than most of our motors that we sell currently, running at their ideal speeds, and it's a smaller wheel. So one would think that would yield really, really low FPS. But again, normal blasters might shoot up into the 140 to 160 range, while this is much lower. The blaster itself came boxed a little differently than most of Worker's other products. Rather than their traditional sort of brown box, this had a little bit more content on it. I believe this is because it is a completed blaster and it's their first completed blaster, which is a milestone on its own. So think about that. Worker is now a blaster company, not just an accessory and mod company. They had fantastic directions, which I have to say, even with the translation, they beat the documentation I put with Jupiter, aside from my video, which is what I hope you all watch before you put it together. This was well done, and it was a lot more clear than their previous ones, like the Dominator, so I think they're really working on making this easier for English speakers to figure out. In the end, I think this is a really interesting blaster. I would love to hear what you think about it. It is certainly unique. It's smaller than everything else on the market, and it packs a pretty decent punch for what it is. It also has a remarkable price point, being basically the cost of any low-end Nerf blaster, which Hasbro hardly makes a blaster under $30 at this point. They have gone up and up and up in price, and everything keeps getting more and more expensive. I'd also love to hear what you think about the previous Community blaster that looks very similar, and I will have more on this blaster in the future as I get a chance to obviously mod it, replace the motors, probably 3D print some stuff for it, and we'll see what happens. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'm out of darts.